Most people already have a picture of Naples, a city of noise, scooters in the alleys, laundry strung between the balconies, a pickpocket somewhere in the crowd. And behind all of it, on the horizon, the mountain that buried Pompeii. The picture is not wrong. It is just unfinished. Vesuvius is real. It is the only active volcano on the mainland of Europe, and it sits a few miles from one of the most crowded cities on the continent. Volcanologists do not call it the most dangerous volcano in the world because of how it erupts. They call it that because of who lives beneath it. 3 million people, in the shadow of a mountain that has erupted more than 50 times since it destroyed Pompeii, and has not made a sound since 1944. They know the history. Every child in Naples knows the history. And still, every morning, the ovens are lit, the markets open, the boats go out. Nobody is leaving. So the question is not whether Naples is in danger. It is. The question is why 3 million people choose to stay in the one place the Earth keeps trying to take back, and what they understand about being alive that the rest of us have stopped noticing. To understand the city, you have to start with the mountain. Vesuvius is not tall. 1,281 meters, lower than many hills. From the waterfront, it looks gentle, almost soft, a double hump of green against the sky. That shape is a lie the mountain tells. Vesuvius is what geologists call a supervolcano, a young cone growing inside the broken ring of an older, larger volcano that destroyed itself long ago. The gentle slopes are made of its own ash, layer upon layer. The debris of eruption after eruption pressed down into farmland. In the year 79, it erupted with a force that buried 2 Roman cities in a single afternoon. We will come back to that afternoon because the people who live here have never been allowed to forget it. But the danger is not only history, it is a map. Today, the slopes of Vesuvius are ringed by 18 towns. The authorities call this the red zone. It is the ground that must be emptied of people before the next eruption, because once the eruption begins, there is no surviving inside it. Roughly 700,000 people live there. Some estimates say more. The plan is to move them all in 72 hours. A population the size of a national capital evacuated in 3 days on the promise of a warning the Earth has never guaranteed to give. It is the most densely populated volcanic region on the planet, and it does not feel like a place waiting to die. It feels like the opposite. The fruit on the market stalls is grown in volcanic soil. The wine in the glass comes from vines rooted in old lava. The yellow stone the whole city is built from was cut out of the same volcanic ground that threatens it. Naples did not move away from the volcano. Naples is made of it. To call this place reckless is to miss what is actually happening here. These are not people in denial. They are people who have made a bargain with a mountain, with the dead, with the ground itself, and have been keeping their end of it for 2,500 years. Because Naples is old, older than Rome had any right to expect. And the bargain did not start with Vesuvius. It started with the Greeks. Around 600 years before Christ, settlers from a Greek colony founded a new city on this bay. They called it Neapolis. the new city. 2,500 years later, the name has worn down to Napoli, and the new city is one of the oldest continuously inhabited places in Europe. In 2025, Naples marked 2,500 years since its founding. Most cities that old survive only as ruins. Naples never stopped. Walk into the historic center, and you can still read the Greek city in the streets. One of them runs dead straight through the heart of the old town, slicing it in two like a blade. Neapolitans call it Spaccanapoli, the splitter of Naples. From the hills above, it is a single dark line cut through 3,000 years of stone. It is not a modern road. It is the lower decumanus, one of the main axes the Greeks laid down. The grid they drew is still the grid people live on. The same line, the same width. 2,500 years of unbroken use. There were 3 of these great parallel streets, the decumani, crossed by dozens of narrow lanes, and the plan was already old when Rome was young. Into that tight Greek grid, the centuries poured more and more people, until Naples became one of the most crowded places in Europe. Families lived, and still live, in the bassi, single ground-floor rooms that open straight onto the street, where the doorway is the window, the kitchen, and the front porch all at once, and half of life is lived out in the alley. And below the street, the city goes down. Beneath Naples lies another Naples. 450 kilometers of tunnels, cisterns, quarries, and catacombs layered 40 meters into the earth. It was not dug for mystery, it was dug for stone. The ground here is tuffo, a soft yellow rock formed from compacted volcanic ash. It is light, it is strong, and it cuts like cheese. For thousands of years, Neapolitans quarried it from directly beneath their own houses, hauled it up, and built the city out of the holes they were making. The walls above and the voids below are the same act. Every block in the old city left a cavity under it. Then the Greeks and the Romans turned those cavities to use. They carved aqueducts and vast cisterns down there, a buried water system that fed the city above through clay pipes and stone channels. For centuries, families drew water from wells that dropped straight into the dark. The Romans left their mark deeper still. 40 meters down, in the cool and the silence, there is a Roman theater where the Emperor Nero is said to have performed. The streets of the living pass directly over the stage where he once sang. Later rulers added their own layers to the dark. In the 1800s, a nervous Bourbon king had a tunnel cut beneath the city as a secret escape route from his palace to the sea, a passage now known as the Bourbon Tunnel, later flooded, later filled with the wrecked cars and rubble of the war above. 3,000 years of Naples, hiding things in the same yellow stone. This is the first thing to understand about Naples. It does not build on top of its past, it builds through it. The Greek street, the Roman cistern, the medieval church, the modern apartment, they are not side by side. They are stacked, one breathing on the next, all of it carved from the same volcanic stone. And those hollows beneath the city, quarried by the Greeks, plumbed by the Romans, were waiting, empty, in the dark. One day, they would save the city's life. But that is a later part of the story. On the surface, the city eats. There is a food the whole world now shares that was invented in these alleys by people who had almost nothing. Pizza. Why here? The answer is poverty. Naples in the 17 and 1800s was crowded and poor, full of people with no kitchen, no oven, often no table. They needed food that was cheap, that could be eaten standing, with one hand, on the way to work. Flatbread, a smear of tomato, a few coins. That was pizza, the food of the poor, sold folded in half and wrapped in paper. A portafolio, they still call it, like a wallet. For a long time, the rest of Italy looked down on it. Then, in 1889, the story goes, a pizza maker named Raffaele Esposito was asked to bake for a visiting queen, Queen Margherita. He made her one, topped in the colors of the new Italian flag, red tomato, white mozzarella, green basil. The queen approved. The pizza took her name, and the food of the Naples slums began its long climb into the most famous dish on earth. Today, there are more than 3,000 pizza makers in the city. In 2017, their craft was recognized by the United Nations as a cultural heritage of humanity. The poor man's supper, protected like a cathedral. And pizza is only the beginning of it. There is the frigatoria, where the poor turned a pan of hot oil into an art. Crisp parcels of dough and vegetables sold by the paper bag. There is the sfogliatella, a shell of pastry built from hundreds of paper-thin leaves, said to have been born in a convent on the coast nearby. A whole cuisine grown out of scarcity and guarded now like treasure. It is a pattern you see again and again in Naples. The city takes what it has, a little flour, a little tomato, almost nothing, and makes something the whole world ends up wanting. And the city the world pictures as poor was, for most of its history, a capital. After the Greeks and the Romans came a long line of rulers, each one certain they had conquered Naples. Byzantines, Normans, Germans, Frenchmen, Spaniards. For more than 600 years, Naples was the seat of its own kingdom, the Kingdom of Naples, and later, the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. And by the 1700s, it was one of the largest cities in all of Europe, behind only London and Paris. Every ruler left a layer: the Normans and their castles, the French and their tall Gothic churches, the Spanish and their walls, and then the Bourbon kings, who made Naples a court of art and music to rival any on the continent. They built the Teatro di San Carlo, the oldest opera house still working anywhere in the world, opened in 1737, decades before La Scala in Milan. They drew painters south, among them Caravaggio, who arrived in Naples a wanted man and left some of his darkest, greatest work on its church walls. And it was a Bourbon king who, in 1748, ordered the first proper excavation of a buried town his workmen had stumbled into in the fields below Vesuvius. The town was Pompeii. The kings are gone now. Naples joined a united Italy in 1860, and the kingdom became a memory. But the layers stayed. Greek street, Roman cistern, Norman stone, Bourbon palace, all of it stacked and still in use. Naples was conquered again and again by some of the most powerful courts in Europe, and every time it was the conquerors who slowly became Neapolitan, never the other way around. But the city's deepest appetite is not for food. 3 times a year, a city of 3 million holds its breath over a sealed glass jar. Inside the Cathedral of Naples is the dried blood of a man who was beheaded 17 centuries ago. His name was Gennaro, in English, Januarius, a bishop martyred around the year 305 in the last great persecution of Christians. He is the patron saint of the city. The blood is kept in 2 ampules, and on 3 days each year, in May, on the 19th of September and the 16th of December, the Archbishop lifts the jar before a packed cathedral, and the crowd waits to see whether the dried, solid blood will turn to liquid. When it does, a white handkerchief is waved. The cathedral erupts. The city exhales. When it does not, Naples grows quiet, because the people here treat the blood as a warning, a direct line between the city and whatever watches over it. And the record, the believers will tell you, is hard to wave away. The blood failed to liquefy in 1944, the year Vesuvius erupted for the last time. It failed in 1980, months before an earthquake killed nearly 3,000 people in the hills nearby. It failed in December of 2020, on the eve of the worst of a pandemic. The Church has never officially called it a miracle. Scientists have their theories about the chemistry. None of it matters to the city. What matters is that Naples is a place that has learned to read signs, because Naples is a place where the ground has always been trying to tell it something. It is a contradiction the city carries without strain. A modern European capital with a metro and an airport and a great football club that still organizes part of its inner life around the behavior of a dead man's blood. And the blood is only the surface of it. Naples is a city in love with death. Go down into the Tuffo again, into a cave on the edge of the old town, and you find the Fontanelle, a vault holding the bones of perhaps 40,000 people. Most were nobodies, the poor, the unnamed, the victims of the plague of 1656, when the city lost as many as 1,500 souls in a single day, and simply ran out of ground to bury them in. For generations, Neapolitans came down here and adopted them. A widow would choose a skull, clean it, bring it flowers, give it a name that no one alive remembered, and pray to it. In return, they asked the dead for small mercies: a healthy child, a win on the lottery, a little protection. To an outsider, it looks like superstition. Up close, it is something gentler. In a city that could be ended in an afternoon, the line between the living and the dead was never going to be a wall. It was always going to be a conversation. And yet, for a city so intimate with death, Naples laughs constantly. Its oldest character is a man in a black mask and a white smock named Pulcinella. He has been on the Naples stage for 400 years. He is a servant, always hungry, always in trouble, always being beaten by someone more powerful, and he always survives, by his wits, by his appetite, by refusing to take the powerful as seriously as they take themselves. Pulcinella is Naples explaining itself. A man with every reason to despair, who chooses instead to make a joke and reach for another plate of pasta. You hear the same thing in the music. The Neapolitan song is one of the oldest popular song traditions in Europe. Melodies of love and longing and the sea that traveled the world with Neapolitan emigrants and never quite left home. There is even a small daily ritual that holds the whole spirit of it: the caffè sospeso, the suspended coffee. You pay for 2 coffees at the bar, drink one, and leave the other waiting, unnamed, for whoever comes in next who cannot afford one. A stranger's kindness, banked in advance, in a city that has never had quite enough to go around. A few streets away, there is an alley where it is Christmas all year. On Via San Gregorio Armeno, family workshops have carved nativity figures for generations, not only the Holy Family, but the whole human comedy of Naples in miniature. Butchers and fishmongers, beggars and footballers, the saints and the recently dead. Every December, the city builds these scenes in its homes and churches, an entire world rendered in clay, with the Holy Birth tucked somewhere in the middle of ordinary, noisy, mortal life. That is where Naples keeps the sacred, not above the everyday, down inside it. This is the texture of life in the red zone. Not fear, noise, appetite, generosity, and jokes told in the shadow of the mountain. Nowhere is that life louder than in the Quartieri Spagnoli, the Spanish quarters. The name is a wound that healed into a home. In the 1500s, Spanish rulers built this dense grid of narrow streets to garrison their soldiers, troops stationed inside the city to put down any Neapolitan revolt. From the start it was crowded, poor, and watched. For centuries it carried a hard reputation, and for some of those centuries, the reputation was earned. Today you climb its steep lanes, and the laundry closes over your head like a ceiling. Scooters thread between the fruit stalls. The buildings press so close that direct sunlight reaches the cobbles for barely an hour a day. And on one wall, 4 stories high, a man's face looks down over all of it. Diego Maradona. He was an Argentine footballer, and for 7 years in the 1980s, he played for Napoli, the team of the poor South, mocked for decades by the rich cities of the North. With Maradona, Napoli won the Italian League twice, the first titles in the club's history. A humiliated city beat the people who had always looked down on it, and it was this one flawed, brilliant, troubled man who made it happen. In 1990, the contradiction reached its strangest point. The World Cup semi-final, Italy against Argentina, was played here, in Naples, in Maradona's own stadium. And Maradona asked the city a question no one expected. Would Naples cheer for Italy, the country that had spent a century looking down on it, or for him? For 90 minutes, part of the city's heart was not Italian at all. Argentina won. The rest of Italy never quite forgave Naples for it. When he died in 2020, Naples grieved as if it had lost a saint, and in a way it had. There are shrines to Maradona in this city now, candles, photographs, relics, kept beside the shrines to San Gennaro. A footballer and a martyr, watching the same streets. In 2023, more than 30 years after Maradona, Napoli won the league again. The whole city turned blue. They painted the alleys, hung the flags, and wept in the streets. For a game, and for everything the game has ever stood for here. But the Quartieri were never only joy. Behind the murals, in the hardest corners of this city, another power has ruled for a very long time, and it does not deal in coffee and kindness. Before we follow it into the dark, look once at what the city built in the light. On the waterfront stands the Castel dell'Ovo, the Egg Castle. Legend says the poet Virgil, who was buried near here, sealed a magic egg in its foundations, and that as long as the egg is whole, Naples will stand. The castle has been broken and rebuilt many times. The egg, the story insists, has held. In a small chapel near Spaccanapoli lies one of the strange marvels of European sculpture, the Veiled Christ. A figure of the dead Christ, carved entirely from marble, draped in a marble shroud so thin you can see the wounds beneath it. For 2 centuries, people refused to believe a human hand could carve cloth that fine, and whispered that the alchemist prince who commissioned it had turned a real veil to stone. There are grander notes too. The vast glass dome of the Galleria Umberto, the wide curved sweep of the Piazza del Plebiscito, the monastery on the hill of San Martino looking down over the whole bay. But the most important view in Naples is not a monument. It is the one that every window in the city shares. The mountain, always there, on the edge of everything, patient. Climb the mountain itself, and the contradiction sharpens. The upper slopes of Vesuvius are black, bare lava and ash, the ground of a place that kills. And yet this is a national park, alive with things that refuse the warning. The first to come back after every eruption is a shrub called Spanish broom. It takes root in raw lava, pulls nitrogen straight from the air, and breaks the black ground with sprays of yellow flowers. Where the broom goes, the soil begins, and the rest of life follows it back up the mountain. Among the flowers move the butterflies. The slopes hold more than 40 species, swallowtails drifting over wildflowers that grow nowhere on the mountain but here. On the warm volcanic rock, the wall lizards bask. They do not flee the heat of the mountain. They live on it, drawing warmth from stone that is itself heated faintly from below. And high on the crater cliffs, the peregrine falcon nests, the fastest animal alive, folding into a dive at more than 300 kilometers an hour, raising its chicks on the rim of an active volcano, because the cliffs are safe and the hunting over the bay is good. Lower down, the contradiction becomes a way of life. The same volcanic soil that buried Pompeii is among the richest farmland in Italy. Vines drink minerals straight from the old lava and make a wine the Romans drank before the cities died. Lacrima Christi, the tears of Christ. Apricots, cherries, the small, intense tomatoes the locals hang in bunches to keep through the winter. The mountain that could end the city is also the reason the city eats so well. The threat and the gift are the same ground. That is not a lesson the people here have to be taught. They have known it for 2,500 years. The bay itself is a curve of the same volcanic story. The Romans turned this coast into the most fashionable resort in their empire. Villas and baths built on warm ground and hot springs. Out in the Gulf sit the islands. Capri with its cliffs and its famous blue grotto. Ischia and Procida, themselves volcanic, the gentler children of the same fire. The water itself is far from empty. Bottlenose dolphins and further out, fin whales move through the Gulf, drawn by the deep volcanic trenches just offshore. And on a few quiet beaches along this coast, loggerhead turtles, animals that outlived the dinosaurs, have begun hauling out at night to lay their eggs, returning to a shoreline shaped, like everything here, by fire. And buried just down the coast lies Herculaneum, Pompeii's quieter twin. Where Pompeii was smothered in falling ash, Herculaneum was sealed under a torrent of hot mud that hardened into rock, preserving wooden beams, food on the table, even the charred scrolls of an entire library. 2 cities killed by the same afternoon, kept by it. Everywhere you look, the fire that threatens Naples is also the thing that shaped everything worth seeing. You cannot pull them apart. The Neapolitans stopped trying a long time ago. The mountain is not the only thing that has tried to destroy this city. In the Second World War, Naples became the most heavily bombed city in Italy. Its port made it a target, and for years the bombs fell on the alleys, the churches, the markets, the people. And the city went underground.
The hollows beneath Naples,
The Greek quarries, the Roman cisterns, the 450 kilometers of tunnels carved out over thousands of years became air raid shelters. Families lived down there for days at a time, in the cool and the dark, on the same stone steps their ancestors had cut. By the end, those tunnels are believed to have saved as many as 200,000 lives. The city had been built out of its own underground. In the war, the underground saved the city back. Then, in September of 1943, the Germans hold the city and they begin to burn it. The people of Naples do not wait for the Allies to free them. Over 4 days, ordinary Neapolitans, dock workers, women, teenage boys, the poor of the quartieri, rise up against one of the most powerful armies on earth. They fight in the streets with stolen rifles and whatever they can find. Boys barely old enough to lift a gun die on the barricades. By the time the Allied tanks arrive, the fighting is nearly over. Naples has freed itself. It is the only city in occupied Europe to drive out the German army before liberation reached it. The 4 days of Naples, they call it. A city the world saw as chaotic and ungovernable turned out to be one of the bravest in Europe. Once it decided, it had finally had enough. But not every threat to Naples comes from outside. There is a power in this city older than the modern Italian state. The Camorra, the oldest and largest criminal organization in Italy, born in the poverty of these same streets centuries ago. It is not one group, but dozens of clans, woven into the economy of the city and the countryside around it. For most of its history, it fed on the same thing that built the quartieri spagnoli. Poverty so deep that crime was, for many families, simply the only employer that was hiring. In the 1990s and 2000s, a war between clans turned the northern suburb of Scampia into a battlefield. The fight was over the drug trade. The bodies were real. In 2004, a 22-year-old woman named Gelsomina Verde was kidnapped, tortured, and killed because she had once dated a man on the wrong side of the feud. She had no part in any of it. Her death was not an accident of crossfire. It was a message written on the body of someone who simply happened to be close to the wrong person. A writer named Roberto Saviano put it all into a book called Gomorrah. For telling the truth about the clans, he has lived under police protection ever since. And there was a slower killing too. North of the city lies an area now known as the Terra dei Fuochi, the land of fires. For decades, the clans made fortunes burying toxic and industrial waste in these fields and setting it alight in the open, poisoning the soil and the water of the people who lived there. The fires gave the land its name. The cancer rates gave it its meaning. This is the part of Naples the films get right, and it deserves to be named plainly. The volcano is honest about what it is. The men who poisoned the land of fires were not. For the visitor, the danger is mostly invisible. The clans have no interest in tourists. But for the families of Scampia and the land of fires, the cost was paid in full. No mountain did that. People did. And yet, in the hardest neighborhoods, something has been turning. North of the old center lies the Rione Sanità, the district of health, named long ago for its clean air and for decades one of the poorest and most feared corners of Naples. It sits on top of the oldest catacombs in the city, early Christian burial caves cut into the tuffo, where the bones of bishops lie beneath frescoes 17 centuries old. For years, those catacombs were locked and left to the dark, and the young people of the Sanità had two futures: leave or fall in with the clans. Then a parish priest named Antonio Loffredo made a different offer. He gathered a group of local young people and asked them to take the catacombs back, to clean them, study them, learn their history, and open them to the world. They formed a cooperative. They became guides, restorers, the keepers of their own neighborhood's dead.
Today,
The catacombs of San Gennaro draw visitors from across the world, and they are run by the children of the Sanità. The money stays in the neighborhood. The young people who would once have had nothing now have a trade, a history, and a reason to stay. The district that the city had written off reached down into its own ground, the same volcanic stone that holds everything in Naples, and pulled a future out of it. The murals of Maradona and of the old comic Toto, who was born in these streets, look down on alleys that are, slowly, coming back to life. And the neighborhood had treasures all along, waiting to be noticed. Tucked into its courtyards are two of the strangest staircases in Europe, open Baroque flights of stone that fold back on themselves like wings, built 3 centuries ago by the architect Ferdinando Sanfelice. For generations, they stood in a district most visitors were warned never to enter. Now the visitors come for them. It is not a fairy tale. The clans have not vanished. But in the Sanità, for the first time in a long time, the dead are paying the living to stay. All of this, the food, the faith, the football, the crime, the courage, happens in the shadow of one volcano. But Naples does not have one volcano, it has 2. And the second one is the one nobody clicked for. The one that does not appear on the postcards. The one that, right now, may be the most dangerous ground in all of Europe. So why does no one talk about the other one? West of Naples, the bay does something strange. The land here is pocked with craters, steaming vents, hot springs, and old volcanic cones, scattered across a crowded suburb as though someone had dropped a battlefield into a town. The Greeks and Romans called it the Phlegraean fields, the burning fields. They believed it was a gateway to the underworld, and they built temples to the dead here. What they did not know is that the entire area is a single volcano, not a mountain, a caldera, a vast volcanic basin, 12 kilometers across, formed when an enormous eruption emptied the magma beneath it and the ground collapsed inward. The town of Pozzuoli, with its 500,000 people, sits inside the crater. To understand why scientists watch this place so closely, you have to understand the scale of what it has done before. Around 39,000 years ago, the Phlegraean fields produced one of the largest eruptions Europe has seen in 200,000 years, throwing so much ash into the sky that it cooled the climate across the continent and may have helped push the last Neanderthals toward extinction. Vesuvius destroys cities. A full eruption of this caldera could reach far beyond them. That is what the word supervolcano means. And the crater breathes. The ground at the Phlegraean fields a rise and falls over years and decades, lifted and lowered by the movement of magma and gas far below. The Italians have a word for it: bradyseism, the slow earthquake. You can read it in the ruins. In Pozzuoli stands a Roman marketplace whose marble columns are bored halfway up with the shells of sea creatures, proof that the ground sank below the waves, spent centuries underwater, and then rose again into the air. The same columns, down and back up. And in 1538, the people of Pozzuoli watched the ground itself give birth. Over a single week, after years of swelling and shaking, the earth splits open and pushes up a brand new mountain, a cone of ash and rock more than 100 meters high, where flat ground had been. They name it Monte Nuovo, the new mountain. It is the most recent eruption at the Phlegraean fields. It built a hill in days. For centuries afterward, the caldera was quiet, but it has woken up. Since the early 2000s, the ground beneath Pozzuoli has been rising again, and the rate is increasing. By 2025, parts of the town had lifted well over a meter, and with the swelling came the earthquakes. Swarms of them, thousands in a year, the strongest in living memory. In 2024 and 2025, tremors cracked walls and sent families into the streets at night. The largest of them, stronger than anything recorded here in decades. The Italian authorities raised the alert level to yellow, attention. They began running evacuation drills, mapping escape routes, inspecting buildings for an emergency they hope never comes. This is not the first time the ground here has driven people out. In the early 1980s, an earlier crisis forced the temporary evacuation of 40,000 people from the old heart of Pozzuoli, a town that is also, as it happens, the birthplace of the actress Sophia Loren. Some families never went back, and tonight, in the same streets, there are people who sleep with their shoes by the bed and a bag packed by the door, listening to a floor that will not stay still. No one knows what the breathing means. It may settle as it has settled before, or it may be the slow approach of an eruption from a volcano that, at its worst in the deep past, darkened the skies over Europe. And under the bay nearby lies the proof of what this ground can do. The Roman resort of Baia, once the playground of emperors, sank beneath the sea as the caldera subsided, street by street, villa by villa. Today, it is an underwater park. Divers swim over Roman mosaics and statues, through drowned rooms where octopuses fold themselves into the corners and fish drift across floors that once held the most powerful people in the world. The sea took the city the Romans built on the breathing ground, and then the sea filled it back up with life. This is the volcano Naples does not talk about, not the famous cone on the horizon, the quiet, sprawling, half-asleep giant beneath the suburb to the west, with 500,000 people living inside its crater, and the ground beneath their feet rising, right now, as you watch this. Which makes the oldest question in the city heavier than ever. The danger here is real, and it is awake. So why does anyone stay? To answer that, you have to go back to the mountain everyone knows. And to a single afternoon 2,000 years ago. The 24th of August in the year 79, though some historians now place it in the autumn, it does not matter to the people in its path. Across the bay, in a villa, a 17-year-old boy is studying. His name is Pliny. He looks up and sees above the mountain a cloud rising in a shape he has never seen. A column climbing miles into the sky and spreading at the top like a vast pine tree made of ash. His uncle, the admiral of the Roman fleet, orders the ships out, partly to study the cloud, partly to rescue the people on the shore beneath it. He sails toward the mountain. He does not come back. What the boy is watching is the death of 2 cities. For 18 hours, Vesuvius rains pumice and ash down on Pompeii. Roofs collapse under the weight. Those who flee choke in the dark. And then, near dawn, the column collapses, and the worst of it comes, a pyroclastic flow. An avalanche of superheated gas and ash moving faster than a person can run, hot enough to kill in an instant. It pours down the slopes and over the towns. Pompeii vanishes. Herculaneum vanishes. They will not be seen again for 1,700 years. When they were finally dug out, the ash had kept everything. The shape of the doorways, loaves of bread still sitting in the ovens. And in the empty spaces where bodies had lain and slowly decayed, hollows had formed in the hardened ash. Hollows that archaeologists later filled with plaster, bringing back the exact shape of the dead. A man shielding his face. A dog straining at its chain. A mother curved over her child, caught mid-breath in the last second before the heat reached them. The boy survives across the water. Years later, Pliny the Younger writes down everything he saw, the only eyewitness account of the eruption that exists. We know what that afternoon looked like because a frightened teenager could not stop watching. Vesuvius has erupted many times since. In 1631, it killed several thousand people in a single night and buried whole villages in mud. For 3 centuries after that, the mountains smoked and grumbled almost without pause, a constant, breathing presence over the growing city. And then, in March of 1944, in the middle of another war, the mountain stirs one last time. Lava pours down the slopes toward the villages of San Sebastiano and Massa di Somma. Ash falls for miles. At a nearby airfield, rows of American bombers are buried and broken by the falling ash. Dozens of aircraft destroyed without a shot fired. Soldiers photograph the eruption in awe. Families flee with what they can carry. When it ends, 2 villages are gone, and around 24 people are dead. That was the last time Vesuvius spoke, 1944. It has been silent ever since, the longest silence in centuries. And here, the city's old instinct returns, because that same year, 1944, in the cathedral, the blood of San Gennaro did not liquefy.
The believers had their warning.
The mountain had the last word. These days, the mountain is watched by more than omens. On its western slope stands the Vesuvius Observatory, founded in 1841, the oldest volcano observatory in the world. Around the clock, its instruments measure every tremor, every shift of the ground, every breath of gas from the crater, feeding one question into a control room day and night. Is it waking? Volcanologists will tell you the silence is not peace. The longer Vesuvius rests, the more pressure gathers, and the more violent the eventual eruption is likely to be. The next one, they warn, could be the kind that killed Pompeii. And waiting beneath it now are not 2 Roman towns, but the Red Zone, 700,000 people, some say more. So why do they stay? Ask the people who live on the mountain, and they do not talk about danger. They talk about the soil. The farmers will tell you the ground here gives apricots and tomatoes and cherries that grow nowhere else. The winemakers will tell you their vines have drunk from this lava for 1,000 years, and that the wine they make, the tears of Christ, cannot be made anywhere else on earth. They have built their homes here, raised their children here, buried their parents here, generation after generation, in full knowledge of what the mountain is. One winemaker, asked why he would never leave the red zone, gave the answer the whole city seems to share. Everywhere has something that can kill you, he said. Here, at least, the thing that can kill us is also the thing that feeds us. That is the bargain at the heart of Naples. Not denial, not foolishness. A clear-eyed trade with the most dangerous neighbor in Europe. The same ground that gives the stone, the soil, the wine, the warmth, and the view from every window. The Neapolitans did not stay because they forgot the danger. They stayed because they decided the life was worth it. And that is the thing the rest of the world, looking at this city and shaking its head, has never quite understood. We tell the story of Vesuvius as a story about death, Pompeii, the bodies in the ash, the afternoon the sky fell. The people who live on it tell a different story. To them, the mountain is not the end of life. It is the reason life here tastes the way it does. And the truth is that no one knows how this story ends. Vesuvius is silent and overdue. Out to the west, the Phlegraean fields are rising, the ground swelling and cracking beneath 500,000 people, the alert at yellow, the drills running. The earth here has not finished. It is only between breaths. Maybe the warning will come in time, and the red zone will empty in its 72 hours, and the city will gather afterward to rebuild, as it has rebuilt after every eruption, every plague, every war, every earthquake, for 2,500 years. Or maybe it will come too fast. No one can say. The people who study these volcanoes for a living will tell you honestly that they do not know. And still, on the cliffs of the crater, the peregrine returns each spring to the same ledge and feeds her chicks on the rim of the thing that could end the city below. She does not know what is under her. She only knows the cliff is high and the hunting is good, and it is time to raise the young. Perhaps that is the closest thing to an answer Naples offers. Not that the danger is small, it is not. Not that the people are brave, though some of them are. Only that life, given a choice between safety somewhere empty and richness somewhere dangerous, will choose the richness almost every time. It always has. On this bay, for 2,500 years, it always has. The blood will liquefy or it will not. The mountain will wake or it will sleep a while longer. And tomorrow morning, 3 million people will open their windows to the same patient shape on the horizon, light their ovens, and begin again. Thank you for spending this time with us here on the edge of the fire. If you would like to keep traveling with us to the far ends of the earth and the people who call them home, subscribe and stay a while. Until the next journey.